Everyone expects shadow work to end with a revelation, a moment of blinding clarity, some final confrontation with the darkest part of yourself, after which the sky opens and you walk out transformed. That's the version people imagine when they start, and it's almost the exact opposite of how it actually ends. Because the completion of shadow work doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, on an ordinary afternoon, when you notice you didn't react to something that would have destroyed you a year ago. You walk past a door in yourself that used to be locked, and you realize you're not afraid of what's behind it anymore. In fact, you've been living in there for months without noticing. Carl Jung spent the back half of his life mapping this exact territory, the slow, unglamorous process of a person becoming whole. He didn't describe shadow work as a battle you win. He described it as a homecoming, a gradual reclaiming of the rooms in your own psyche that you'd sealed off so long ago you forgot they existed. And he noticed that the people who actually completed this work rarely knew they had. They weren't celebrating. They were just different, quieter in a way that others found hard to name. Today I'm going to walk you through the 8 signs Jung would recognize as evidence that your shadow work is genuinely complete. The subtle shifts that mean the integration has actually happened, not just been talked about. And I'm going to show you who you become on the other side of it, because that person is almost nothing like the one the self-help world promised you'd be. If you've been doing this work for a while, and you keep waiting for some grand finish line, there's a good chance you've already crossed it and nobody told you what it looks like. Let's start with the first sign, because it's the one that catches people most off guard. The first sign is that you stop being surprised by your own darkness. There was a time when discovering something ugly in yourself felt like an emergency. You'd catch a flash of envy or cruelty, or a desire so selfish it frightened you, and the whole system would go into alarm. You'd rush to explain it away or drown it in shame, or convince yourself you weren't really that kind of person. The shadow, in Jung's framework, is exactly this. The collection of everything you decided was unacceptable about yourself and buried so you could keep believing you were good. When the work is complete, that alarm stops going off. You notice the envy and you just notice it. The cruel thought arrives and you observe it the way you'd observe weather. It's not that you've become a worse person, you've become an honest one. The energy you used to spend policing yourself, denying whole regions of your own experience, has been handed back to you. Think about someone who spent 30 years believing they were endlessly patient, endlessly giving, the one who never resented anyone. And then one day they admit, calmly, without drama, that they've been quietly furious for most of their adult life, and that the fury makes sense. Nothing collapses. The admission doesn't break them, it settles them. Because Jung understood that the parts of yourself you refuse to see don't disappear. They run the show from underground. The moment you can look at your own darkness without flinching, it loses the power it had when it was hidden. The second sign is that the people who used to trigger you become almost boring. This one is strange the first time you feel it. There's a particular kind of person who used to send you spinning. The arrogant one, the manipulator, the loud narcissist who took up all the air in the room. You'd leave those encounters shaking, replaying them for days, unable to figure out why they got so deeply under your skin. Jung called this projection. What we can't tolerate in ourselves, we see everywhere in others, magnified and unbearable. The person who enrages you is almost always carrying a piece of your own disowned material. The ambition you never let yourself have, the selfishness you buried, the confidence you were taught to be ashamed of. The charge you feel isn't about them. It's your own reflection, thrown back at you from an angle you can't recognize. When the shadow is integrated, the projection dissolves. You meet the arrogant person and feel almost nothing. You can see them clearly. Maybe you even feel a flicker of compassion because you understand what drives that kind of performance now. The hook that used to catch you isn't there anymore because you pulled the bait out of your own chest. This is one of the cleanest signs of all. When the people who used to own your nervous system become merely uninteresting, something fundamental has shifted. The third sign is that you can be disliked without disintegrating. For most of your life, disapproval functioned like a physical blow. Someone thought poorly of you and it registered as a threat to your survival, because at some point early on, it was. The persona Jung wrote about, the acceptable mask you built to earn love, was constructed entirely around being liked, being good, being someone people wanted around. Shadow work quietly dismantles that, not because you stop caring about people, but because you stop needing them to validate your right to exist. You reach a point where someone can misunderstand you, dislike you, walk away from you, and you feel the sting of it. You're not made of stone, but the sting doesn't touch the core. There's a self underneath now that their opinion can't reach. Picture the woman who spent her whole life bending herself into whatever shape a room required, tracking every micro-expression to make sure no one was upset with her. Then, imagine her at a dinner where someone criticizes her openly, and she just listens, considers it, disagrees, and moves on. No spiral afterward, no 3 days of replaying it. She's found the thing Jung said only comes from integration, a center of gravity that lives inside her rather than in the shifting opinions of everyone around her. The fourth sign is that you stop performing your own healing. This is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's one of the most telling. In the early and middle stages of shadow work, there's a strong temptation to broadcast it, to announce your breakthroughs, to narrate your growth to anyone who'll listen, to wear the identity of someone doing the deep work like a badge. And it feels sincere at the time, but Jung would have recognized it for what it partly is: the ego wearing spiritual clothing, converting your transformation into a new performance, a new persona to be admired for. When the work is actually complete, the need to perform it evaporates. You stop talking about your shadow. You stop referencing your therapy in every conversation. You stop needing anyone to know how far you've come. The transformation goes underground, into the way you actually live, and it stops needing an audience. The quietest people in the room are often the ones who've done the most work. They're not hiding it. They just no longer need it to be seen. If you've noticed lately that you'd rather just live your growth than talk about it, that the whole project of demonstrating your evolution has quietly lost its appeal, that's not you falling off the path. That's you arriving at the end of it. Before we go further, I want to mention something for those of you recognizing yourself in these words. We've put together a guide called True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises drawn from Jung's work, built for exactly this stretch of the journey, when you're trying to tell the difference between real integration and another clever disguise the ego has put on. If you want something to walk beside you as you figure out which rooms in yourself are still locked, the link is right below. Now let's keep going, because the next signs go deeper than the ones before. The fifth sign is that you can feel your anger cleanly. For people who buried their shadow early, and that's most of us, anger was one of the first casualties. You learned that anger got you rejected or punished or abandoned, so you filed it away in the basement with everything else. And what happened instead was that the anger leaked out sideways, as passive aggression, as anxiety, as that flat, resentful exhaustion that has no obvious source, as illness sometimes. When the shadow is integrated, anger comes back online, and it comes back clean. You feel it arrive, you know exactly what it's telling you, and you can use it to set a boundary, to name a wrong, to protect something that matters, without exploding and without swallowing it. Jung was clear that wholeness doesn't mean becoming endlessly gentle. It means having access to the full range of yourself, including the fierce parts, and being able to choose when to use them. Consider the man who was praised his whole childhood for being easygoing, for never making trouble, for being the one who could always let things slide. It took him 40 years to realize that easygoing was just the name his family gave to the fact that he'd amputated his own capacity to say no. When his anger finally returned, it didn't turn him into a tyrant. It turned him into someone with edges, someone you couldn't walk over anymore. And the people who'd relied on his boundarylessness called it a change for the worse, which is often the clearest confirmation you're doing something right. The sixth sign is that you stop dividing the world into good people and bad people. This is subtle, and it's profound. Before integration, the psyche runs on a kind of moral split. There are the good ones, the ones like you, And there are the bad ones, the ones out there who cause all the trouble. It's a comforting way to live because it keeps all the darkness safely external. You never have to look at your own capacity for the things you condemn. Shadow work makes that split impossible to maintain. Once you've genuinely met your own darkness, your own capacity for cruelty, cowardice, betrayal, self-deception, you lose the ability to stand cleanly above anyone. You look at the person everyone's condemning and you don't see a monster. You see a human being who lost the same battle you've won, or the same battle you're still fighting. This doesn't make you naive or soft on harm. It makes you clear. You can name what's wrong without needing the other person to be subhuman in order to feel safe. Jung believed this was one of the highest fruits of the whole process. The moment your compassion stops being a performance and becomes simple recognition. You see yourself in everyone, including the people you'd rather not resemble, and something in you relaxes. The war between the good self and the bad self, the one you've been fighting your entire life, quietly ends. There's no longer an enemy to project outward because you've made peace with the enemy inside. The seventh sign is that your inner world goes quieter. In the thick of shadow work, the unconscious is loud. Vivid dreams, sudden emotional eruptions, old memories surfacing without warning, a general sense of being flooded by material you didn't ask for. Jung understood this as the buried content rising up to be seen. Everything you'd compressed for decades, finally getting its turn to speak. When the integration is done, that pressure releases and the noise settles. The dreams don't stop, but they change character. They become less frantic, less like the psyche screaming to get your attention, and more like a quiet, ongoing conversation. The emotional eruptions become rare because the emotions aren't trapped behind a dam anymore. They move through you in real time. There's a stillness that arrives, and at first it can be disorienting. You got so used to the internal storm that the calm feels almost like something's wrong. It isn't. It's the sound of a house where all the doors are finally unlocked and nothing is banging to get out. The unconscious stops fighting you because you stopped fighting it. You made room for it, gave it a seat at the table, and it settled down the way anything does when it's finally been let in from the cold. The eighth sign is a strange, ordinary peace that your ego finds almost disappointing. This is the last one, and it's the one people are least prepared for. You spend all this time doing intense, dramatic inner work, and some part of you expects the reward to be equally dramatic. Enlightenment, bliss, a permanent high, some radiant new self who glows in every room. What you actually get is quieter and stranger than that. You get to become ordinary, at home in yourself, not special, just real. Jung called the goal of all this individuation, becoming the person you actually are underneath everything you were taught to be. And the person underneath isn't a superhero. They're just someone who no longer wastes their life at war with themselves. The peace that comes with integration is unremarkable from the outside. You do the dishes, you have your morning coffee, you live your life. But underneath the ordinariness, there's a settledness, a sense of being genuinely inhabited by yourself that most people never touch. The ego finds this disappointing because the ego wanted a trophy. It wanted to be extraordinary, admired, complete in some visible way. And what you got instead was the thing it could never have delivered, the quiet freedom of a person with nothing left to hide, from others or from themselves. You stopped performing okayness and simply became okay. That's the whole prize. And once you have it, you understand why Jung spent his life pointing toward it. So who have you become if you recognize yourself in these 8 signs? You've become someone harder to manipulate because there's no hidden shame left to exploit. Someone harder to shock because you've already met the worst in yourself and made peace with it. Someone who can sit with another person's pain without needing to fix it, flee from it, or make it about you. You've become quieter, in the way still water is quiet, not empty, but deep. You've also become, if we're being honest, someone who doesn't quite fit anymore. This is the part nobody warns you about. When you stop projecting, stop performing, stop needing approval, stop dividing the world into heroes and villains, You become difficult to place inside the systems that ran on your old self. People who relied on your guilt can't reach you. People who bonded with you over shared enemies find you strangely unwilling to hate. The relationships built on your smaller self start to strain, because that self isn't available anymore to play its part. Jung was unflinching about this cost. He said the individuated person is often lonely, not because they can't connect, but because they can only connect authentically now, and authentic connection is rare. You've traded a wide net of shallow belonging for a narrow circle of the real thing. Most days, that trade feels like a bargain. Some days, it feels like exile. Both are true, and you learn to hold both without needing to resolve them, which, itself, is one more sign the work is done. And here's the quiet twist Jung kept returning to at the end of his life. Completion isn't really completion. There's no final door, no last room, no moment where you get to set the work down forever and declare yourself finished. What these 8 signs actually mark is a change in your relationship to the whole process. You stop doing shadow work as a project you'll one day complete, and you start living as someone for whom self-honesty has simply become the water you swim in. The integration continues, but it stops feeling like labor. It becomes the way you breathe. So the paradox is this. You'll know your shadow work is complete precisely when you stop needing it to be. When the question of whether you've arrived stops mattering because you're too busy actually living the life on the other side of it. The finish line dissolves the moment you cross it, and you find that where you're standing now was always the destination. Not some brighter, better version of you waiting in the future, but the plain, whole, unhidden person you buried a long time ago in order to survive a world that couldn't hold all of you. That person has been waiting in the locked rooms this whole time, and the sign that the work is done is simply that you've stopped locking any doors. You walk through the whole house of yourself now, all of it, the beautiful rooms and the ugly ones, with the lights on. Nothing left to fear, nothing left to hide. Just you, finally at home in the one place you spent your whole life running from. If any of this landed, if you recognized yourself in these signs, or felt the quiet ache of realizing how close you already are, our guide, True Self-Discovery, was built for exactly this moment. 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's teachings, made to help you find your way through the last locked rooms and settle, finally, into the person who's been waiting there all along. The link is right below.